You never learned this in school. No syllabus, no lectures, no degree. But it's already been used on you. More times than you think. That argument where you said sorry, but deep down, you weren't the one who started it. That sales call where you agreed to something you never really wanted. That advertisement with the soft background music, the smiling faces, the words that made you feel like you're missing something. And suddenly, you bought it, not because you needed it, but because you felt like you weren't enough without it. This isn't persuasion, it's programming. It doesn't hit you head on. It slips in sideways, through words, through tone, through silence. Not with force, but with precision. You didn't notice it because it didn't feel like an attack. It felt familiar, comfortable, even safe. That's why it works. Because it wears your voice while planting their thoughts. You weren't trained to see it. Because a trained mind can't be controlled. And let's be honest, they don't want resistance. They want compliance. Not the dramatic kind, the quiet kind. The kind that says yes before you even realize you had the option to say no. The real challenge isn't the command. It's the suggestion. The real battle isn't outside you. It's inside your judgment. Inside your choices. Inside the voice in your head that was never really yours. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. Once you understand it, you stop being the target. You become aware, and that changes everything. If you've always felt like the world moves around you, but you're not quite sure how, then this is your guide, your protection, your place. Subscribe now and learn to recognize what no one else sees. Most of what you think isn't actually yours. That's not a metaphor. It's not poetic. It's psychological influence. Your thoughts are products. Packaged, delivered, installed. All without your permission. And most concerning of all, with your full cooperation. Let me show you how it works. You walk into a store. You're not sure what to get. You feel overwhelmed by too many options. So the salesperson smiles. They point to a plan. And they say, "A lot of smart people choose this one. Actually, just this morning, a doctor picked it for his family." They don't push. They don't demand. They simply plant, and something inside you moves. You don't want to argue. You don't want to seem cheap. You want to feel like you belong with the smart ones. So you smile. You nod. You say, "Sure, let's go with that." You didn't choose. You were guided. And you called it your decision. That's the genius of it. Influence, when executed precisely, doesn't feel like influence. It feels like consent. Because it's not about forcing you. It's about guiding you softly, invisibly, until the direction feels like your own. This is where the problem begins. We think our minds are neutral, that our thoughts are born from clarity, from logic, from freedom. They're not. Your mind is shaped by anchors, tiny cues that set the standard before you even think. Price tags ending in 99. Limited time. Only banners. Last 2 seats remaining. Each one is a trigger. Each one pulls you from reason into reaction. It's called anchoring. Then comes priming, the art of creating unconscious readiness. Ever wonder why politicians repeat certain words? Strong, tough, leader. Not by accident. They're loading your filter. They're telling your subconscious what to expect before your conscious mind even has a chance to ask. It's why the music in horror films makes you tense before anything happens. It's why a job interview feels better when the room smells like vanilla. You're being shaped without being touched. And then framing. Change the frame. Change the meaning. Same picture. Different story. A 10% chance of failure sounds terrifying. But a 90% success rate sounds safe. That's the same statistic. But your choice shifts because the frame changed. Because your mind doesn't operate on facts. It operates on feeling. Add in social proof. Everyone's doing it. And your brain says, if they are, it must be right. Because being alone used to mean danger. Evolution coded that into your biology. Throw in scarcity. There's only one left. And suddenly, what you didn't want becomes what you must have. Then seal the trap with commitment bias. The more you say yes, the harder it becomes to say no. Because now your ego is on the line. And no one wants to feel inconsistent. Finish it off with authority. A uniform. A clipboard. A title. And your brain shuts down resistance. Because we're taught from birth to respect those who know better. Now pause. Do you see the pattern? It's not one tactic. It's an ecosystem. A layered system of suggestion built to make you feel like the idea was yours. But it wasn't. You weren't forced. You were nudged. You were praised. You were made to feel included. And you pressured yourself. That's the final twist. They didn't push. You leaned. Because the most powerful command is the one that feels like your own thought. Control isn't always forceful. Sometimes it sounds like a compliment. You seem like someone who makes smart decisions. You don't strike me as the kind who hesitates. You're the type of person who gets things done. None of that is a request. It's a direction. Woven in velvet. Delivered through ego. Disguised as validation. By the time you act, you believe it was your idea. And maybe that's the most dangerous part of all. Because once the technique becomes invisible, you stop looking for it. And that's exactly when it affects you most. Thought can be influenced. Suggestion is powerful. And most of what you believe was never yours to begin with. You believe your choices are grounded in logic, that you weigh pros and cons, that you make rational decisions. But here's the truth. You're not logical. You're emotional. And skilled manipulators know it. A single emotion, fear, guilt, desire, can override a decade of reasoning. Not sometimes. Every time. That's not weakness. It's biology. Your emotional brain, your limbic system, fires before your prefrontal cortex can even process facts. By the time logic shows up, your emotions have already cast their vote. And you're just there justifying it. Let's make this real. A child hears their mother say, "I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed." No shouting. No punishment. Just a sentence. Soft, Subtle, surgical. But that sentence stays with the child. It becomes an internal wound. They start tying their value to approval, to making others proud, to never disappointing anyone again. And years later, they're still living under that sentence, still reacting to it, still affected by it. That's how it works. Emotional imprinting. You don't remember the facts. You remember how it felt. And that's all it takes to steer your actions for life. So let's be direct. No one needs to overpower you. No one needs to outsmart you. They just need to make you feel something. And now you'll guide yourself straight into the trap. Let's zoom in. A partner says, "You're the only one who really gets me." It sounds like love. It feels like connection. But it's a test. A hook. Because the next time they pull away, you'll chase harder. Because you don't want to lose what made you feel seen. A boss says, "I'm trusting you with this. You're the only one I can rely on." It feels like a compliment. But now your worth is on the line. You won't say no, even if it burns you out. Because now you're protecting the identity they gave you. A politician stands on a stage and says, "They don't just hate me. They hate all of us." Suddenly, disagreement becomes betrayal, and blind loyalty becomes morality. You stop asking questions because fear has already chosen your side. No one debated you. They activated you. The emotional brain doesn't need data. It only needs a story, a sentence, a sigh, a silence. Once you feel, you stop thinking. Fear is the easiest one. It short-circuits logic, triggers survival mode, and makes you seek safety, even in the arms of your captor. But fear isn't the only lever. Guilt is gentler, more refined. It doesn't scream. It whispers. "How could you do this to me? I thought you were better. After everything I did for you." And suddenly you bend. You shrink. You apologize for having needs, just to silence that guilt. Guilt trains you to betray yourself with a smile. Then comes pride. They'll say, "You're not like the others. You always do the right thing. You're a leader." Now you're locked in a persona. You can't be weak. You can't back out. You can't show doubt. So you keep marching, even when it kills you. Because the moment you stop, you lose the identity they handed you. You don't obey them. You obey who they made you believe you are. Desire is more dangerous. It feels like freedom, but it's a leash. Désir says, "This product will make you whole. This relationship will fix you. This opportunity will prove your worth." And when you chase it, you become blind to red flags, to exploitation, to your own gut. Because chasing desire feels better than confronting emptiness. Desire is a mirage. It keeps you walking toward a promise that was never real. And then comes hope. Hope is the final seduction, because it feels positive. It keeps you patient, tolerant, forgiving. He didn't mean it. She'll change. They'll see your value eventually. But hope has a dark side. It teaches you to stay, to wait, to accept crumbs, to call suffering growth. Hope is how they bind you without chains. And here's the twist. Once an emotion takes over, you become the one justifying their behavior. You become your own jailer, your own captor, your own manipulator. They only needed to spark the emotion. You'll do the rest. Because now you don't just feel, you believe the feeling, and feelings don't ask for proof. That's why emotional manipulation is so effective. It bypasses defense, hijacks perception, and reprograms you from the inside out. And worst of all, you'll defend the very people who did it to you. You'll say, they were under pressure. I was too sensitive. That's just how love works. No, that's how programming works. You didn't fall. You were guided. You didn't choose. You were triggered. And the final twist, the most dangerous technique, is the one that feels like love. Because love makes you surrender. It makes you stay. It makes you forget what you deserve. You'll keep giving, explaining, forgiving, fixing, because they just need someone to believe in them. But no one believed in you. And still, you stayed. Not because it was love, but because you were emotionally outmaneuvered. Now we go deeper. Because now, we're not just talking about tactics. We're entering the architecture that holds them together. The system layer, where manipulation becomes structure, and structure becomes reality. Let me ask you something. Have you ever been in a situation where no matter what you said, you lost? Where both choices felt wrong? Where staying made you feel weak, but leaving made you feel guilty? That wasn't confusion. That was engineering. That wasn't a tough choice. It was a psychological trap. See, a skilled manipulator doesn't force you to stay. They make you feel like leaving would hurt them. And that hurt becomes your guilt. And guilt becomes your leash. This isn't conversation. It's a system of control built out of emotions, framing, timing, and implication. Let's go deeper. Have you ever heard this? If you really cared, you'd stay. Don't throw this away like it meant nothing. After everything I've done for you, it's always you that runs. These aren't questions. They're traps disguised as vulnerability. And when you respond with empathy, you're already in. You think you're being compassionate, but you're just being conditioned. Because this is the layer where your strength is used against you. Your kindness becomes currency. Your guilt becomes glue. And every response you make becomes data for them to refine the next trap. Let's break one down. It's now or never. You think it's just urgency. But beneath that urgency is fabricated scarcity. They're installing panic. Your brain perceives threat, not of danger, but of regret. And regret is the pressure point. You don't want to lose. You don't want to miss out. So you move. Not from freedom, but from reactivity. You're not deciding. You're escaping. Here's another one. If you don't love me enough to fight, then maybe this isn't real. They're not asking for proof. They're moving the frame. Suddenly, love equals suffering. Silence equals betrayal. And just like that, you're in a false dilemma. Fight for someone who's hurting you, or be labeled the one who didn't care. That's not romance. That's strategic guilt. It's not a moment. It's a repeated pattern. A system. One more. I wouldn't act like this if you didn't push me. This is the most poisonous layer, because now you become the villain in their pain. They flip the blame. They turn your boundaries into attacks, your distance into punishment. And now, instead of defending yourself, you start explaining, apologizing, fixing, until the lines blur. And you forget who did what to whom. This is what the system layer does. It blends emotional manipulation, cognitive framing, and social pressure into one seamless web. It's not about what they say. It's about how those words are stacked. Suggestion, guilt, urgency, compliments, victimhood, stacked, layered, timed, like code, written to reprogram your reality. And here's the brutal part. The longer you stay in the system, the less you question it. Because systems don't just trap you. They train you to adapt, to predict, to anticipate pain and avoid it by compliance, to silence yourself before conflict, to change yourself to maintain peace, to doubt your own needs and call it maturity. By then, you're no longer being manipulated. You're autopiloting the rules they installed in you. You've become the system's agent. It's not just about abuse. It's about repetition. It's about installing patterns so deep they feel like identity. And that's the scariest part. You begin to believe that your pain is normal, that your silence is virtue, that your exhaustion is love. And all along, they smile. They act confused. They say, "I just want to be close to you." But what they want is not closeness. They want access to your thoughts, your compliance, your guilt reflex. And every time you flinch to please them, you reinforce the code. That's how systems stay alive. They don't beg. They condition. They don't restrain. They reshape. So here's the harsh truth. By the time you start questioning what's happening, you've already been in it too long. By the time you wonder, "Is this okay?" you've probably already betrayed yourself 5 times. The system layer doesn't just bend your choices. It builds your narrative. It writes your voice. And then it makes you defend it. Because that's the final genius of the system. You don't even know what parts of you are still you. You've seen the techniques. You've seen how words bend minds, how silence can pressure, how framing can guide people without them ever knowing. You've seen how thought can be planted, how reality can be written, not with facts, but with carefully placed emotions. But now, a more important truth. Not everyone who sees these patterns should use them, because awareness without wisdom becomes destruction of others and of self. Let's go back. Have you ever used a tactic? Just a small one. Maybe you said something knowing it would trigger guilt. Maybe you stayed silent just long enough for someone to beg. Maybe you flattered, not to connect, but to win. It didn't feel evil. It didn't even feel wrong. But somewhere deep, you felt a flicker. A moment of knowing. This wasn't honest. This was control. That flicker matters. Because that flicker means you're not blind. And if you're not blind, you're responsible. Let's be clear. We all influence, consciously or not. We want what we want, and we learn what works. But there's a difference between awareness and addiction. There's a difference between recognizing the pattern and needing it to feel powerful, because the truth is brutal. If you use these techniques to prove you're strong, you're already weak. If you manipulate because you're afraid of being rejected, you're not strong. You're afraid. If you silence others to stay in control, you're not leading. You're hiding. This is where real mastery begins. Not with sharper tactics, but with deeper restraint. Imagine this. You walk into a room. You feel the tension. You hear the tones shifting. You recognize the game before it begins. One person is guilt framing. Another is love bombing. Someone is baiting for emotional reaction. And you say nothing. You don't play. You don't correct. You don't expose. You just observe. Not because you're passive, but because you're centered. That is real power. The ability to see the script and not need to rewrite it. Because if you truly master this realm, you don't use it to dominate. You use it to exit, to walk away from cycles, to dissolve patterns instead of feeding them, to recognize what's happening and not react. That's the art of awareness. Seeing the pattern but not needing to engage it. It's tempting to strike, especially when you know the weakness, when you can feel their emotional pattern forming. You could say one sentence and break them, make them chase, make them doubt, make them apologize. But for what? To prove what? That you're smarter, that you're untouchable, that you've read more psychology books than them. That's not power. That's ego. That's insecurity wrapped in intelligence. True strength is silent. True strength doesn't react. Because the moment you need to prove something, you've already lost position. Let's go deeper. There will come a moment when you're hurt. When someone frames you, blames you, twists the story, you'll feel that fire rise, the urge to respond, to expose, to play their game better. And in that moment, you must remember, just because you can win the game doesn't mean it's worth playing. That's detachment. That's the awareness you don't use. It's not weakness. It's refusal. Refusal to validate their system by entering it. Because they want you to fight. Even if you win, you're still in their arena. But silence. Absence clarity. That burns longer than any insult ever could. Because manipulation thrives on feedback. It feeds on response. Even anger is fuel. But when you give nothing, they collapse. Not because you attacked, but because you didn't feed the loop. That's what scares them. Not rage, not confrontation, but calm, cold, calm. Stillness that doesn't budge. So here's what I offer you. Don't learn these patterns to become dangerous. Learn them to become immune. Learn them so you can walk away without explanation, without guilt, without needing them to understand. Because when you see the game clearly and you still choose peace, you win. Every time. No caos. No emocional residue. No trail of damage behind you. Just silence. Just sovereignty. And here's the twist. That's the only real victory. Not making them feel what they made you feel, but being so unmoved they can't even tell if they mattered. You don't need to hurt them. You just need to stop needing them. That's awareness in action. That's the final form of protection. Unshakable detachment. Let's talk about what you've already lived. Case 1. There's that one friend. They never raised their voice. They never insulted you. They just made you question yourself. You'd leave conversations wondering, was I overreacting? Maybe I did mess that up. Even when you knew, deep down, you didn't. They were calm. You were confused. And somehow, you ended up apologizing for things you didn't do. That wasn't peace. That was high-level gaslighting. A silent war on your sense of self. Case 2. Think back to a classroom. The teacher didn't yell, didn't even speak. They just looked. And suddenly, the entire class fell silent. Backs straightened. Whispers died. That was frame control. That was status used as influence. No words, just presence. And everyone obeyed. Case 3. You've seen this in leadership. A team is talking, debating, even arguing. Then the leader stands, says nothing, but everything changes. The tension, the posture, the silence. The room reorganizes itself around them. That's not charisma. That's power by presence. Earned through consistency. Held through control. Maintained by detachment. These weren't just moments. They were systems. Unspoken. Precise. Repeated. You didn't have the language for it then. But now you do. You've seen this. You just didn't have the words. Now you do. And once you name it, you can't unsee it. You can't unfeel it. You just decide to recognize the game or to step outside it completely. You've seen inside the patterns, but don't worship the techniques. They're not trophies. They're awareness tools. And tools mean nothing without wisdom behind them. The true game is invisible, and so must your protection be. Recognition isn't being understood. It's being unreadable while reading everyone. No noise. No performance. Just awareness. So listen carefully. If you've always felt like the observer, if silence is your first instinct, this isn't just a video. It's your shield. Learn here. Strengthen in silence. Walk through the world protected. Subscribe and stay aware.